Hello and welcome to the program Hot Button. Communication is an essential ingredient in every human sphere. And communication in a relationship is one very, very necessary condiment that makes a relationship thrive. Without communication, a relationship cannot be said to fare well. My name is Johnny and I have with me on the program
Imesa Orukera
and
Elua Amarachi.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Communication. Communication. You know, one very significant word that has thrived on this program is the word communication. And it was beginning to make me feel like this particular thing is always appearing when we're talking about issues in a relationship. You always hear people say, there has to be that communication. We have to communicate. We have to. How important is communication to a relationship?
Communication is very, very important to a relationship because it gives you room to express your feelings, opinions, and your expectations from the relationship itself.
Wow. Okay, let me hear from you.
Well, I agree with what he said. Communication is essential because without communication, there won't be any room for growth. I believe that in a relationship, it's two people. So if you're not able to communicate, then nothing's going to proceed from there.
So communication is that important.
Yes.
Because if a relationship has to grow, communication must be the fertilizer.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what can be considered a bad form of communication in a relationship?
Personally, I would say not communicating at all is a bad form of communication.
Not communicating at all is a bad form of communication.
Because some people find it hard to express themselves and all of that. So it's a bad form of communication, even though it is a form of communication.
Okay.
Silence is a form of communication.
Silence is a form of communication.
Yes, but it is a bad form of communication.
It's a bad form of communication.
Yes.
Because silence does not say anything other than silence.
Yes. You now make it based on assumption.
Based on assumption.
Yeah, because
you have to figure it, you have to tie it around a lot of things.
And you can make the person you are letting assume make a wrong assumption. Yeah, because you're not clear what you're saying because you're not saying anything.
Wow. So not communicating in itself is a bad form of communication.
Yes.
Let me hear from you.
Sometimes people they always tend to jump at a person. They never tend to wait.
Okay.
For example, if you and I are having a conversation, we're communicating. You're not being receptive in the sense that you don't wait for me to finish what I have to say. You're just jumping at it. People always want to reply. They don't want to understand and hear what's going on. So I think that's what makes for bad communication. People are always waiting for that feedback. They're not waiting to let the message come to them. So
that's very key. You know, if you don't look at that thing deeply, you might not get it.
Yes.
I'm trying to talk. I need you to listen. And then give me appropriate feedback.
Exactly.
When you begin to cut in, you're giving me response before I'm actually communicating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a bad form of communication. I think from my own side, there is also something that could be a bad form of communication. Do you think over communication can be a bad form of communication?
Yes.
I beg to differ.
Okay.
I feel like since we're talking about a relationship, in my opinion, there's no such thing as over communicating.
Over communication.
Because there'll be situations where sometimes for us young people, we might not want to say something because we're afraid that our significant other might feel some type of way. That's your fear of over communicating.
Okay.
But the whole essence of being in a relationship is to be free to say what's in your heart, in your mind. So if you're in a relationship, there should be no fear of over communicating because you're expressing how you feel and you're entitled to that.
Do you think that's
I don't agree with you.
Please, let's hear it.
Because I believe sometimes people need space.
Okay.
There are some people like, they don't want you all around them every time, no matter the type of relationship you have with them. Yeah, because some people like have low self-esteem.
Okay.
So they don't find it easy to interact, and then just because they have a soft spot for you, they might now feel you want to overuse it to get to them. So they need space sometimes.
They need space. Okay, in this case, there has to be an understanding, because there are certain people who don't have that communication thing in them.
Yeah. It's a skill. So
and then when you begin to communicate too much, it's like you're bringing them down, sort of.
Yes.
May I interject?
Please do.
I feel as though if that's the case, I understand people are different, but if that's the case, then that individual does not necessarily need to be in a relationship. Because if you're not willing and ready to have certain conversations, to talk freely because of insecurity or you've been hurt in the past, I feel like you should take time for yourself, be with yourself, communicate with yourself. And then maybe when you're able to understand how communication actually works, then you can get into a relationship. But if you always want time for yourself, you're afraid of your significant other saying one thing or the other, then you don't need to be in a relationship.
It's not a matter of all the time that you don't want to talk. There are some certain times of the day that you just want to be alone. I don't feel because we're in a relationship like we have to talk 24/7, you have to bug me and all of that.
You know why? Because from the point where this thing came from, over communication, there are some people, you are traveling to Lagos, they want to know when you get to the park. When the bus starts moving, they want to know when you land in Lagos, but you haven't gone home. They want to know when you actually enter the taxi that's taking you home. And then they want to know when you get into your house.
But can that be seen as just, since we're talking about Lagos, knowing the state of our nation?
Yeah, it's more like an example. It happens like in every kind of, they want to know every little bit of step that you're taking. Sometimes it could even stretch as far as, I want to know who you're talking to. If I call you and my call is on waiting, you have to tell me. Some people don't even wait to ask. They expect that the moment you drop that call and then I'm calling you, you have to tell me who you were on the phone with.
Yes.
Well, I think there's a thin line between over-communication and intrusion of privacy.
Okay.
In that instance.
But you know, over-communication could actually be perceived as intrusion.
Okay.
That's why I said over-communication could be a bad form of communication.
Yes. That's
right?
Yes.
So there is such a thing as over-communication now.
Yes.
And it's a bad form of communication.
Yes.
Depending on how it comes.
Yes, definitely.
Great. Now, what brings about bad communication in a relationship?
Misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding.
Yes.
Elaborate.
Well, misunderstanding, pardon me, as a mass communication student.
Okay.
There's the understanding of the process of communication.
Okay.
In the channels of in the process of communication, there's a sender, there's a channel, there's noise, and then there's feedback.
That's interference.
Yes.
Okay.
So in the process of a person trying to communicate a message, there can be noise, there can be a disruption. So that disruption can be based on maybe like what we were talking about before, assumption. I'm assuming that what you're saying is this rather than me understanding what you're actually trying to say. So I think that can also be that also has a part to play.
That has a part to play. That can actually bring about bad form of communication. Yes. All right, let me hear from you.
Misunderstandings. I feel you have to know what I like to hear and what I don't like to hear.
Okay.
We have to give each other this type of respect that, you know, that I like this, this is what I like, this is what I don't like.
Okay.
And then we avoid things like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Give us an example, like at what instance can something happen that you don't like and then it comes off to you as a bad form of communication?
Like, let's say we have a problem now, and then I have a friend, and then she's like, okay. She goes to the friend and she's like, okay, he did this thing to me. I was the one that did it. Why didn't you just come to tell me directly? And then we'll fix it up.
Okay. Okay, so that could come off as a bad. Yeah. And there's also something I think could also come off as a bad kind of communication. There are some people, like you said, that feedback thing. I ask you a question. You're not answering the question. Okay. You are answering from the understanding of why I'm asking the question. I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah.
I ask you, why did you open the food? And then you're telling me, I'm not going to eat it. do you understand that?
Yes.
Yes.
Why did you open the food? I'm not going to eat it. It's different. Yeah. Just tell me why you opened it. Could it be that you want to warm it or something? And then don't tell me what you're not going to do. Because some people communicate like that.
Yes.
I could give you a series of examples of you ask somebody a question. Rather than them answering you, they want to know the reason you asked that question. So they answer you based on what they think is your reason for asking the question.
Yes.
Do you understand?
Yes.
So sometimes it could come off as a bad kind of a communication.
Definitely.
Because number one, you want to assume why I'm asking the question, but I have just given you, and most times you could be misled. You might just overthink it, like this is why I'm asking the question, whereas I just want a simple answer. Okay, now, so what makes a good conversation or communication in a relationship?
I think receptiveness.
Receptiveness.
Yes. When you are willing to listen, when you're willing to take time to understand what your partner or what your partner is trying to say, that makes for a good conversation or good communication. For example, if you, like the example that you put up, asking a question, why did you do a certain thing? If I'm willing to understand your point for asking me that question, I can then communicate why I did it, rather than just trying to make excuses.
Okay.
So I think the problem a lot of people have is they make excuses rather because they don't understand or because they're
over-assuming.
Okay. So that makes things, that then complicates things in the channel of communication. So if you're willing to just relax, receive what the person is saying, try to take your time to understand, and then come about and give your feedback, then that makes for good
communication. Let me hear from you.
I feel a good communication can come up from like a high level of understanding. Like when you understand me and I understand you, then we have a lot to talk about. Like it can be my dreams, places I want to go to, my spiritual beliefs. It can even come down to what I'm watching on TV. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of understanding.
Wow. So in a situation where you're watching maybe football, and then I come in and then I start singing. You're watching football. You don't want any noise.
Yes.
But I just come in just to let you know that I'm not interested in that, what's it called? Football. Match. I just begin to sing. And you just don't want, you just want to concentrate on that football.
Definitely.
That's bad?
That's bad from your end, not my end. Because I just want to concentrate.
You just want to concentrate.
Yes.
But I'm trying to let you know that you're concentrating on this football too much. You need to focus on me and leave the football.
It's what I like.
People communicate like that. Are you aware?
Yes, definitely.
You don't have to speak it. You don't have to speak it. If you're spending so much time on the phone, and I don't want to be rude to tell you, hey, you're spending so much time on the phone, and then I decide to go look for a lone chair away from you, maybe the double seater we're sitting in, and then I stand up and sit on that chair away from you. That's a communication.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to tell you you're spending too much time on that phone. I expect that the moment I move a little bit away from you, you should have understood that I'm saying you're spending so much time on your phone.
Can that also be seen as bad communication?
Talk to me about it.
So in this instance, where rather than voicing out how you feel and letting somebody know, you're acting and hoping that they understand
yeah,
based on their own assumption.
Okay.
So I feel like that can be a bad form of communication. If, for example, you're on your phone and I want to speak to you, the easiest thing to do to solve that issue is to approach you and say, can I please have a moment of your time? Talk about it, verbalize it, speak. Don't just sit in a corner. Because not a lot of people would understand that. You might sit off, and in my mind, I'll just say, okay, maybe you want some time for yourself, so I'll just leave you there.
Yeah, but aren't there times where we should communicate non-verbally?
There are times like that, but in order to avoid misunderstanding.
Because sometimes assumptions are like equal probability.
Okay.
You could get it right, you could get it wrong.
Yes.
And then there are some people who would rather understand body language, because there is something as body language as well, you know. So, but it depends on how it is being perceived. If it comes off like, you should have just talked to me about it, especially if you know that I don't usually spend time on my device, you could actually talk to me and then we could sort it out. Now, what can be done to improve better communication and avoid misunderstanding?
I think for me, based on experience, I think the best thing to do is just, even if you might not have anything in particular to say, always speak.
Always speak.
Always speak.
Okay.
So, for example, you had a busy day at work and your significant other probably wants to speak to you and there's really not much to say. How are you? How's everything going? Leave it at that. Because if you don't keep pushing for communication, there'll be a point where it stops completely. So there'll be no form of improvement.
If you don't keep pushing.
If you don't keep pushing, it will stop. So you need to always speak. Even if it's not anything elaborate or grand that you have going on, say something. Make sure that the communication is always there.
The communication has to be always there.
Yes.
Okay, let me hear from you.
Yeah, on this I will actually support her.
Okay.
Because a popular relationship author, Elizabeth Bouquet, she said in a quote that communication is a lifeline in any relationship. So it's like, no matter how busy you are, you have to create time. Even if the example you gave, you said, if you say how are you, you can stop there. You can just be like, oh, I'm going to be very, very busy today. We'll talk later. That's still communication.
Okay.
And
there's no hard feeling about that.
Yes, it lays a foundation of understanding. So you know that, okay, I'm up to this, I'm up to that.
Now, if there is one very difficult thing that is, usually prevalent in relationship, it's how to communicate to your partner about communication. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
I want to talk to my partner on how we can communicate better. How can that happen? How can I bring my partner and then I say, hey, this is how we need to communicate? How should that happen?
I think the main thing is to know who your partner is, know how your partner functions. There are certain people that you can't just outrightly come and say, this is what I want us to do. I want us to talk. You can't really come up to some people like that. So I think the first thing to do is just initiate an atmosphere. Make sure that the atmosphere for that particular conversation is there. Then once you've gotten your partner in the mood to speak about the conversation that you want to talk about, then you come in and say, I would like for us to speak better, or I would like for this and this to happen within our communication patterns. So creating that atmosphere, knowing how your partner functions, and going with that.
Okay. Let me hear from you.
If you understand a person, then you know how the person communicates. Because communication is a two-way thing.
Two-way thing, yes.
Yeah. So if I speak badly to you, you can come and meet me that, okay, I don't like the way you did this, and then we'll resolve it. So
there is no need to say, hey, sit down. Let's discuss communication in this our relationship. Is that a bad thing?
It's not, but I feel like that's the extreme.
Yes.
Is that an extreme? Because if you're obviously having problem with communication, people have problems with communication.
Definitely.
In a relationship. There are some who just go off, and then you need to talk about it. It is even as bad as, why didn't you respond to my text on time? Are you aware?
Yeah.
Yes.
You have been online, I've sent you a chat, and then you did not respond in time. But the funny thing is, this person could even be on a video call or a voice call. Then why is it not good that we sit down to discuss? How many seconds do you want it to take before I reply your message? How many minutes will be too long? You don't think that's something that people should sit down and, because it is a problem. Have you been in a situation like that?
Yes.
Why did it take you so long to reply to my message?
Well, for me personally, I have always been on the receiving end of having to, is it the receiving end? I've always been on the end of having to ask these questions.
Okay.
So I think where the issue lies is maybe not me having the issue with communication, but the other person having an issue. So what happens then is you have to also realize that other people have things that they have to do.
Okay.
People have lives. People have things like what you're saying. The person could have been on another call.
Okay.
Situations come about and you can't really help what happens in life. Life is unpredictable. So in instances like that, I feel like it's also important for example, people like me to relax.
You have to relax.
Relax.
Okay.
Realize that the other person is a human being too, that has a busy schedule and things that they have going on with themselves. So maybe I should find something else to do and wait for that other person to come about, and then we can communicate. Because communication is also about patience.
Okay.
So I need to be patient, focus on what I have going, and then when it's time, we communicate.
Okay. What do you think?
I believe in wanting to have like a me time,
Okay.
like time to yourself. Like, let's say I'm feeling off today, and I'm not just in the mood for talk and all of that. So I'm reserved for that day. It happens. We're human beings.
It does
We're not
happen.
perfect.
It does happen.
Yeah.
But you do not think that if things like this happen, there are times, because I am not your mind timekeeper. I do not know when you want to have your moment. I do not know when you want to have your me time. When you want to have your me time is when I would want to have our us time. Do you understand?
Yes.
And then this us time, you're not in for it. How? So can't we just have a sit down together and say, hey, on Thursdays by 7, by now you should have known. At 7 o'clock, I like to be to myself because I have mathematics lecture tomorrow or something. I want to concentrate.
Okay.
You should have known.
Yeah.
Or if I drop you a message, please, no matter what you do, even if you cannot respond at that time, just drop me thumbs up. It won't take you a minute. Let me know that, okay, you have seen it, but I'll get my answer. You don't think it's something that people should sit down and discuss? Because people do not, they think communication should just happen because we understand each other. There are some people who would never get it right.
True.
There are some people who do not know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And if I say, hey, come, let's sit down and work out how to communicate, do you think it's out of place?
No, in that instance, it's not out of place. It's completely understandable.
To have your partner sit down and say, let's communicate. Now, where there is a misunderstanding based on a misunderstood communication, how can that be resolved? You said something, you are not responsible for how I understand what you have said. If you say something and then I misunderstand it, it is not your fault. How can that be resolved?
Well, like what you said, have a sit down, talk about it. I feel a lot of the times, a lot of people are too scared to say, yes, this is how I felt about what you did, and just they're afraid of having that conversation.
Okay.
But in a relationship, you need to talk about it. If you misunderstood what was going on, sit down, let's talk about it. Converse, communicate. So the main thing is just communicating about every single thing. Even if I feel like your assumption of what you said was wrong, communicate, talk about it. Like I said before, every step of the way, talk.
Okay, talk every step of the way. Let me hear from you.
I'll say I believe in telling people who are familiar with the person in question.
Okay.
Like, let's say I misunderstood what she said to me.
Okay.
And then her best friend, and I go and meet her best friend, and I'm like, this is what happened, this type of thing. Help her understand that this was what went wrong, and I'm sorry.
Okay, so you could actually involve someone you think she respects.
Yes.
And respect her back, and then get her to understand. That's also a way to resolve it. I think, do you have something against that?
Yes, I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
I believe that relationships should be a two-way thing. Well, three-way. You, your partner, and God.
Okay.
If you have an issue, talk to God about it. Don't talk to anybody else. Because when you involve a third party, things become complicated. The other person might feel some type of way about you. For example, a lot of the times with women, if I have an issue with my significant other and I tell my friend might say, oh, leave him. If he's acting this type of way, forget about him. And then that causes friction between myself and my significant other. So if you have an issue, talk to your partner, ask God for clarity, or speak to a professional. Not your friends, not somebody that I respect, a professional.
And before you speak to a professional, it must have reached like the limit.
Yes.
Okay? But the only approved third party you're talking about is God.
Yes.
So you can bring God in. What you're trying to say is, in the relationship, God has to be fully involved.
Exactly.
To bring about any meaningful communication. Because one thing with communication is, if you get it wrong, sometimes it could lead to anger.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you understand? And most people don't react to anger calmly. It's usually with a lot of aggression.
Yes.
But when you know that I don't have to be so, angry, because God has been involved in this relationship, you manage your communication strategies very well, especially as it relates to the relationship. All right, thank you so much for being a part of the program. Very insightful.
Thank you very much.
I'm very, very sure we have communicated enough for someone to understand how to communicate in his or her relationship.
Yes.
Thank you for being a part of us.
There
you have it. Communication is very key in our relationship. But if there is something you should leave here with today is, when you get to that point of seeking to talk to someone else, the best third party you can talk to about your relationship is God. He is the one who can direct your communication the right way. So if you're in a relationship, no matter what you do, make sure God is sailing your boat of that relationship. Thank you for being a part of us today. Join us again same time. Bye for now.